Rising never happens.
Okay.
Most of the saga was planned before Lysander. We know that they could extend their lives. Would you actually want an heir, or was it just like a plaything?
So here's the problem, right? So when you have an heir, that is insurance, it's security for your reign, right? If you don't have an heir, then it doesn't pass through the family line. So I think the difficulty is Lysander would have gotten a little bit anxious and chafed a bit. And I think if you're familiar at all with Plantagenet dynasty, basically happened that the father had 4 or 5 sons, and he wouldn't die conveniently. In fact, he had his sons when he was 35, in his early 40s, and he was still very vicarious, active. And his sons had a problem with that. They tried two rebellions against him, spurred on by their own mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who hated him. And so I probably, if the Rising didn't happen, I probably would have modeled that. The planet, it sounded like that. It's Plantagenet dynasty. So I imagine Octavia would probably resort to her old devices. And, it happened to her daughter, so, yeah.
Physical scars play such a big role in the whole of the series. I got into a lot of trouble as a little girl, getting lots of scars, playing around and running around from home. And I'm curious if you have a fun story for us about scars, and if there's any fun stories that got into books.
Sure. I don't know if they got it. Actually, the whole idea of the Fearless Scar came about for 2 reasons. One, I was studying in Germany, and there was still dueling clubs active during that time. And duelists would have sometimes this scar right here, given them after they've lost the conflict. So that was kind of like percolating around my brain. And then I worked for a man who had been attacked by a mastiff when he was younger and had this scar right here. And so that was on the forefront of my mind when I was coming up with the Fearless Scars. So that aspect, it's also a thing about hiding the trauma that's been done to you that I found somewhat fascinating. But I think that overall, my best scar story is when my parents were going on a vacation. My parents were kind of loath to leave me when I was a kid because I was just terrible. And they left me with my grandma. The first time they kind of went away separately, I was playing the Mississippi River and I got this horrific cut on my knee. My grandma had to take me in to get stitches. And I don't remember all the stitching. I just remember my grandma's like 5'1", maybe. It's like negative 5 feet, just a tiny woman. But she squeezed my hand so hard, I don't remember the pain of the stitches at all. I just remember my grandma's ferocious hand on me. And I think that my grandma, in some ways, probably not like directly, influenced Dayon, Darrow's mom. And so, not necessarily funny because grandma had a really strong grip, but painful sure. Yeah.
Does true love have to be romantic? And then who was Darrow's true love?
Great question. If you read various corners of the internet, it always starts romantic. I don't lurk on fan pages, but I've had some stuff sent to me like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'll look at it, and I've read some really erotic stuff out there. Let's just say olive oil featured heavily. So Darrow guesses. I think true love can be platonic as well. I think we have a lot of different. I think soulmates is a hard time. It's a hard term because it excludes. I mean, it's a 2-person thing. I think it's a little exclusionary to other types of love. I think twin flames is a lazy way of saying it. But I think there are people that run parallel in your life course. A lot of it I talk about with my own friends is the eternal compass you have, and also hating the same things. And when you hate the same things, what that really is your judgment for bullshit. And I think in our lives, it's really hard to be with someone who doesn't see the bullshit you see. And so that's honestly who Darrow has always kind of been attracted to and interested in. And so I say he has a pack love. I think the Eo is the young love he had. Virginia, the love of the man he became. But then his love of his brothers is inseparable from my opinion, Darrow. And I think he's had at least 2 brother loves, maybe 3 or 4, if they don't survive longer. That's what you're saying to me, man. Yes, I wrote these things.
I think one of the strongest points of your writing is the dialogue
and the way that the narration changes between perspective characters. What goes into deciding how a character is going to speak? Like what kinds of things they're going to focus on, the types of idioms that they use, how they think? How do you determine on that?
So it's not, great question. I also am proud of the evolution of the series in that direction. I think that there's many different ways of defining characters and sketching out characters. I think I'm the complete opposite of Stephen King, for instance. Stephen King will have a laundry list of things, a complete dossier of what they like, don't like, what's happened to them throughout their life, and I'll present it to you. I prefer to show, not tell. I think that when you give a really complete dossier to someone that can provide context, then the reader is then challenged to remember all that. And I think that it's much more interesting to see the character come to fruition on the page. And so for me, I base a lot of it on the idioms that they have. I base a lot of it, of the characterization on how they interact with people. So what I have is a very simple, and the music definitely helps. It helps me understand their emotional tenor, let's just say that, right, or their through line.
Gotcha.
But the real thing that I think I have to have is, I'm talking about on a simple note card of saying what they want, why they want it, what physically stands in their way, but then what in themselves makes them unable to get that thing. So I don't think a character is interesting unless they're at war with themselves, in one respect or another. And I think you'll see that from Victor to Severa to Vera to Io to Virginia to the Jackal. In fact, I find it very difficult to write a character who is not at war with themselves. Like the Jackal was much trickier to write after he had closed that emotional arc with Nero at the summit, because all of a sudden then he's one note. His big thing was he knew that he needed his father's affection, but he didn't want to be weak enough to admit that, and that was his own internal struggle. And so for me, it all comes down to why are the characters angry at themselves? What is what's that classical grief structure, right?
Yeah.
Surprising, but an inevitable but surprising end due to a fatal flaw that they have. And so I try to look at that, and I think that informs their idioms and their mannerisms and so much about them. Like Severa rejects other people because he's afraid of being rejected, because he's so used to it. Cactus diminishes everything because he's afraid of true emotion, because his brothers never allowed him to have that in the house and would be seen as weak for having true emotion. And so the characters then somehow write themselves once you understand those basic truths.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah.
So the colors, I think, are some of the most interesting parts of the world. I think it's one thing that they keep it exciting, what's attractive to me is that's what you would say. Which of the colors, as far as their culture and doctrines and what they do, is your favorite to write and explore?
I say the reds and the golds, both because for very different reasons. The golds are fun because the villains are fun, and it's also a challenge because it's very easy to write. Not very easy. It's interesting to write someone who has everything and is still not happy, or who has everything and is afraid of losing it. And the villainy in golds is very fun to write. It's also fun to have a character that you innately want to dislike, and then bring you close to them, and then toy with the audience in a bit of being like, will this person have a redemption arc? Will this person be the best version of themselves, or will they cave to their own devices or the pressure of the outside world on them? Whereas reds are interesting because they come from such a sympathetic background, and this concept of the pressure, the concept of family life. Often the best art comes from the oppressed in various societies throughout the world. And so they're artistic, they're deep, they're interesting, they're short lives, they live the hearts on their sleeves. Yet at the same time, they're more bigoted than the golds are. And so I find that very interesting to write as well, because the reds have a more oppressive social structure than the golds really do within their own caste. And I find that from the good guys, from being the good guys, understandable, but also interesting to explore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is highly specific about something that happened in Dark Age.
All right, you're not in the dark age. It's time for your earmuffs. Who's not in the dark age?
I'm not.
Shame.
I can't believe you fell for it. Yeah.
Okay, so for Mom, well, she's not really that great a fan, is she? Fair enough. All right, so if you've not read Dark Age, it's time to do the whole earmuffs. Can we do that? Try it, give it a try. You're good? We know you're good. Give me your fellows, man. Stop being so dull. All right, let's also try to use code, just in case they're not earmuffing, which I don't know why they wouldn't.
I feel like code is appropriate for Lightburner and not for page, because we can pass that.
Well, what you feel is irrelevant. This is about the movie.
Osberg's prophecy in Dark Age. I don't need specifics. I just want to know if it is true what happens in this series. He seems like a very Professor Trelawney character where he speaks nonsense constantly and then has a true prophecy. And his prophecy in that book is very specific. And I've been obsessed with it since you wrote it. And I have a post-it note that I had in my
Cross
computer
references.
as my referencing. I just want to know if it comes.
Then you know if I answer your question, then I spoiled my own book.
It's vague. It can be interpreted in
Sure.
many ways.
Yeah. That's like David, I'm sorry.
It's not.
Vague could be interpreted.
So, I noticed in book 6, you used a quote from the Odyssey for like each of the 4 sections. Did you have a particular reason why you wanted to do that? Or was it just because this book felt so much like an Odyssey that you needed to have Odyssey quotes?
So, sure, for that like young feeling, right? But Dark Age was meant to be the Iliad in this series for me. It was inspired by it. The most direct quotes come from it. There are various scenes that in my mind reflect instances from the Iliad. And the Iliad is about in my mind, the senselessness of war while still expressing the heights of beauty that humans can attain in war. So it shows the most beautiful and our most petty traits, right? It's about the Achilles, the best warrior being the pettiest on the living planet. And that's also what makes it so interesting. It explores it all. Whereas the Odyssey is a very different journey. And it was very important for me because Dark Age was a book about pushing the characters and also the audience to the fullest extent of their endurance. Because it just hits you in the face repeatedly, right? It's like that old, was it Mike Tyson quote? Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. And so
Punch in the mouth.
Punch in the mouth. Yeah. Mike Tyson's supposed to write ones and some really scary ones. If you've seen the video I'm talking about, I can't repeat it, we're in church. There's a lot where it's like, God, man. Anyway, I found that with Dark Age, I wanted to explore the darker elements within the structures that I've created within our world and within the characters themselves, and push their to that utmost extreme. And then the Odyssey is about a man whose pride he's achieved great victory in the Trojan War, and is going home, and he takes more credit for the victory than he should. And due to his pride, is then humbled by the disciple. And so this, in many ways, is then a reflection of Darrow's journey. His pride has been a great point of discussion, and is obviously a huge thematic thrust of these latter books, because I wanted to explore the archetype of the hero who's been told by everyone that he's the Messiah, and see what his pride has wrought him. And delivering him home didn't feel natural. It felt as though he had to go through an emotional and physical odyssey. Because I think the best books, the best stories pair the emotional journey, the thematic journey, and then the physical journey together. And so for me, the Odyssey felt like a very natural parallel. Thank you for the question.
Hello, thank you for redeeming Valeria. I didn't really like her in Iron Gold.
You don't want to whiner?
Thank you for doing that, because I was like, why did you?
Because she has she got stepped on. Yeah, no.
This wasn't my favorite. But I just wanted to say,
some box from you right
my question is why did you give it a head from? Anyway, I just wanted to say that Dark Age is one of the, it was an exception, but I was like, why did you make it so complicated? But
you got questions.
yeah, but no, I just wanted to say that I mentioned I only read half a light reader, but, for me, how are you gonna bring, for me, there's a, deficit not bringing to the masses. You brought the comic books, which was exceptional, but how are you gonna bring your story, your world building, your, great story of everything that you've done to the masses? I think that, everybody should be, just get a glimpse of this, and so in different mediums, how are you gonna bring it to the masses?
Well, thank you. I've got a question for you. I've been working for a long time on live adaptation. I think the best version of this would be in a live action TV series. I think it is very hard to make a live action TV series. I think the second best version would be in a great animated TV series. It is also very hard to do a great animated series. However, it's far easier than doing a great live action series. But you cannot have a great animated series in today's world, the way that Hollywood works, and you cannot have a great animated series and then do a great action series, like live action. But you can't have a failed live action series and then redeem yourself with a great animated series. So I'm shooting for the stars.
So I know that the razors represent a lot of the emotional and physical journeys of each character that carries them, because they engrave their journeys on them. And I have a two-part question here. What would it be engraved on your razor if you had one?
Big energy. I'm hit the side as you wish.
And then, where's Lauren's razor? If you can answer that without spoiling anything.
Well, Lauren's razor is last possessed with Lila, by Lila.
Right.
Luna's under blockade.
Correct.
Maybe you'll get to see when someone gets through the blockade. It's a series, guys. Where's the abomination? It's a series. Well, the wiki unfortunately needs more contributors, so what are you doing? Thank you for your question. By the way, if you guys want to contribute to the wiki and help out, it'd be great. It really helped me get things right, because my editors are lost.
So I have a lot of questions, but I decided on this one. She's been through a lot. Why do you hate Lyria so much?
I mean, you can say that about any character.
I don't know. Anyone she falls in love with.
Spoilers, bro. I don't hate any of my characters. Next question. I really love the guy who's supporters that carried on. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate you guys popping the bubble and bringing this to the screen. Let's jump right into it. Because of the high volume, low gravity, and elaborate extraterrestrial settings, and extremely diverse environments combined with the fast-paced and high-tech combat, I feel like that much of the Red Rising series would be lost brought to the screen in live action. That being said, what style of animation would you like to see Red Rising? I can provide examples of things in the writing if you want.
So I think the mic's not working. You're very right. The difficulties is fortunately I've created a team that I think that embraces the difficulty. I think those are the elements that set it apart. Whether or not we screw up or not, that's a different story. I'm very close to the adaptation and put together the people that are doing it. I'm not. Oftentimes you sell to a production company and you go away as a writer. I did that, and then it didn't get adapted by Universal, thank God. And then I got the rights back, and so I set like my entire purpose to making sure that anyone who was attached to the project would then be someone who really loved the soul of the project. But the problem is, I think a lot of times things are made by people who see this opportunity and are not actually fans. Everyone who's a part of it is actually a fan. They'll send me memes of things. Sometimes they won't leave me alone. And what's really important to me is that fan element in another creative, in someone in a discipline that is not my discipline, means that basically so many things can be lost in translation. So many things cannot be right about a project. But what's really true is that the soul of a project stays the same, right? So if we look at best adaptations, I think we can all agree, Lord of the Rings is the number one trilogy. Lord of the Rings is not identical to the books, right? It's quite different in many ways, actually. But what is the same is the spirit and the respect. In fact, Peter Jackson's saying it's not our job to put our politics into the Lord of the Rings world, in J.R.R. Tolkien's world. Our job is to tell the story that he told. And so that's the same concept that everyone who's so far involved in the project has. Problem is that you gotta get a huge check to run the thing, right? So that can still be lost in translation. But honestly, even if a live action adaptation fails, that's fine. You can still do animated. You can't do animated and then do live action.
Yeah, I just want to know if you were to picture it as animated, is there a specific cartoon or movie that you can stylize, just what you see?
I mean, I think Arcane has done a wonderful job. I don't know what Studio Ghibli does, of course, right? But I would, if I had my perfect world, I'd prefer it to be actual animation, not CGI, or not done with computers, because I think that there is a beauty, even if it's not a visual facsimile of real life. So the stylization of it would be great. I mean, I struggle to find a perfect comp in my head. I think that, like, my favorite artwork ever was done in Akira. And I think that kind of visual style will lend itself well to a retro futuristic world. Yeah, so hopefully we'll get that chance now. Thank you. Virginia.
If you were to imagine Mustang as a TNT character,
Oh boy.
I know there's not much spell casting in Red Rising, but just
Yeah.
what TNT build would you make?
Oh, she'd probably be a support. She'd probably be some sort of a support druid or mage. She'd either be a mage or a healer. For me, I don't think she'd be a AOE mage, or a damage dealer necessarily. So support character makes sense. So probably a healer. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Buffs. She'd just be buffing everyone. They're just here like, what?
Thanks out first for Nirvana in Seattle. Appreciate it. I've been reading a lot of Reddit, like, people don't appreciate how things dropped off
It's a series.
And I keep hearing about how the Abomination dropped off.
They complained about the Abomination from the start. No one's doing
Now,
that.
all I can think whenever I hear Sephiroth speak is like, oh fuck, Sephiroth. And so I'm just eager to see your reaction to see how Sephiroth's mind is working right now.
Well, how Sephiroth's mind is working will have to be explored in the story. The idea that something drops off in a series, to me, especially when the planet is under blockade, or the moon is under blockade, is, as a storyteller, you've got to decide where you're concentrating. And also, I think that there's a problem with bloat books. I think that a lot of the epic fantasy series I read try to do everything in one book, and then they have to do more things in the next book to try to make up for that. I don't think you have to do everything in one book. I think that often things don't necessarily happen all at the same time. And also that you can set something aside to deal with when it is more poignant, when it is more, actually, to be honest, even real with the story. If the moon is under blockade, that seems like a logical enough answer. However, some people want to have the cake and eat it too, even though they didn't like the cake in the first place. Then it can't be happy. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Because you have opinions on something, you still have the problem. or it means you've at least left an indelible enough impact that you can be frustrated. And that's fine. But this is also why I can't reread it.
That's fair.
Why? Because I wrote Red Rising in a vacuum, I wrote Golden Sun in a vacuum, I wrote Morning Star having like had signings where we had like 12 people that night. And then it's the nature of fan bases to take emotional stake in characters and emotional stake in the story. That's perfectly acceptable. In fact, I look at it as a compliment. But at the same time, I feel as though if you liked the books, you should have a little trust.
Yeah.
You know, I think the same thing we had. If I dealt with, I dealt with a lot of stuff in my bringer. There's a lot of villains or characters that met their thematic end of their arc, or even heroes, right? And so I think that if I was a reader, I would presume that that'll probably be a focus of the next book. So thanks for the question. As you can tell, a little annoying. Thank you. There's the two questions I haven't been able to escape: Abomination and movie. I know. Thank you, though, Matt.
Thank you for writing these books. I really appreciate
This is
it.
my best favorite question, yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And your readers.
My life is.
If you want to take a second, you can. Yeah, just, if you want to take a second, someone else can set that, so you know when you're ready to read, you can.
Okay, so I heard you say before that you don't do a lot of outlining or planning ahead of writing. But you managed to leave a lot of really great breadcrumbs that lead to something later in the book. So like Dark Age, I'll say they talk about. And I'm curious if you have the idea already and you're planting those as you write, or do you go back later to add in hints of something that you realize is going to happen?
Yeah, for me, the first draft is always the hardest, because I tried dense outlining and it doesn't work for me because I have to be emotionally surprised when I get to things. Often if I have an outline, the character will reach a decision point where they make a decision that I need them to make from a plot perspective, and then it feels as though I'm doing something that is inherently insincere. So I need it to be a very big outline. So I got into a lot of trouble with Lightbringer because I had a 30, 40-page outline, which is very unlike me, trying to avoid this 4-year chasm which I created. So the 400 pages I threw out were all things that were outlined. And I wasn't excited writing them, it didn't work. So for me, the real outline, the real fun, and horror is in the first draft. First drafts are so hard for me. But in first drafts, what I try to do is riff so that I can leave a lot of seeds and see the things along the way. And so what I'll do is I'll recognize moments or leave a lot of seeds, and then I'll cut them off later in the second draft. So my books really, I terrify my publisher by sending them the first draft. Honestly, my editor has to not show me higher ups in my publishing house because she knows my method, but the publishing house agreed to be like, this guy's gotten into drugs. And so fortunately, my editor becomes a great shield for me. And so they trust that I know what I'm doing. So that first draft is about laying out those seeds. Second draft is about collecting them all, seeing the ones that work and eliminating the ones that don't. And third draft is really deeply about the characters and the themes and drawing it all together. But I'd say that first draft is seeing what's there, and exploring it, and trying to. So it's not all done at one time. It's like layers of paint in order to establish a true paint, or true, I'd say depth. I need to be able to do it in probably 3 drafts. And it's really on that third draft that I feel as though I have an actual story. Up until that point, I'm, convinced I'm an idiot. Honestly, and a lot of it has to be done on faith. And so I have imposter syndrome all until that third draft, in which case I'm like, am I possibly smart? That voice inside is really what you're waiting for to happen, but it often doesn't happen. But those seeds, when I see them again, they spark something in me, I get excited, and that's how I like writing.
Cool, thank you. Sorry.
No, no worries.
I just wanted to say thank you because I appreciate it. And it wasn't really much of a question. I just really appreciate the fact that you did this for us.
As far as I'm concerned, it's like me building a fort in the woods and being less lonely because y'all come along with me.
I'd like to say thank you as well.
This is great.
But you referenced in an earlier question that you like writing with characters that have that internal conflict, and then you just referenced the voice in your head and imposter syndrome. I'm curious, like I think the thing I love the most about your books is just the way that the characters have that internal dialogue, where like Darrow's talking to himself, he's processing his emotions, his thoughts, his choices, and it shows the depth of who you are. And so I'm curious, like in your day-to-day life, are you processing your thoughts like that on the page, where it's kind of dialogue back and forth with decisions, and then also does that bleed into any of the characters that you've done the point of view from?
Great question. I'd say that it is not now ever really an intentional thing. It's usually like if you wield a paintbrush when you're happy, you might make happy strokes. When you wield it when you're sad, you might make sad strokes. And so for me, the journey I've gone on in writing a book usually comes to me in the third draft. And so it's almost this epiphany that happens after the fact. You see all these things that I wrote in it that all of a sudden make a lot of sense. And I think that was the struggle with Lightbringer, is that I didn't remember that, I didn't recognize that. And so the journey didn't parallel my own emotions or my own epiphanies, so to speak. And that, I think, was why I was so uncomfortable with that first draft I had. And why so much had to change. And so it's not as though I can have a great perspective on myself when doing this. A lot of times I mean, Darrow's journey in the first ones worked because I was coming out of college, I was lonely, sad, I was like going through some hard personal times, and I was looking for for lack of a better expression, I was looking for a hero. I was looking for a vessel to pour my angst into, who had a cause that he could throw himself behind, a pure cause. And then a lot of the other stuff is just my taste, like analyzing it, having him be more ruthless than most main characters, having him be whiny, self-indulgent, proud, obstinate, stupid, vengeful. All those things were my taste. But I'd say that his general path is kind of mirrored my own personal journey, at least emotionally. But I would say a lot of it is not me being cleverer than, or not me being clever at all. It's just me realizing, sometimes very dumbly, that I've just gone through the same journey that I'm the character through, and then realizing the epiphanies out the other end. And so I hope that in the end of this, I will have come to the same conclusions that my characters espouse in terms of their moral reflections and things. But it's not as though I'm an engineer who is intentionally putting it into this thing. Instead, I'm Jackson Pollock throwing it at the wall and finding meaning and shapes.
That's awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Yeah, I don't get on. Where do you put your wrap on your cycle, your Sistine Chapel? What's next?
Fantasy. Fantasy and sci-fi, I'd love to do. There's a lot, so it might not be the first thing I do after this. It might be something that isn't quite as dense. It might be a dalliance, so to speak. But I would love to. Here's the difficulty: you'll have a lot of concepts in your head, a lot of ideas that I've had over the course of Red Rising that I wanted to attack. But a bullet that isn't clipped too long can rust and can misfire when you shoot it. And so a lot of times an idea, the same way, that has been around too long can begin to corrode, and you can start having less confidence in it. So I have a bunch of different ideas that I have, but I don't, like in high fantasy, but I'm not sure they might be my next one. I'd like them to be, but I'll have to see if they work. Because I'd say if there's an idea in your head for 1 or 2 years, you need to attack it and have that catharsis of expression. Because so many things have been in my head for 7, 8 years that I've already explained to other people. I found fault in them. I've not had that beautiful ignorance that comes with thinking it's the best next thing. And so the true answer is I'm not sure. But the real answer is eventually a big fantasy series. Because that was, one of my great loves growing up was the fantasy series that I read, and they really shaped me. Red Rising is science fantasy. It's inspired probably most directly by Dunes, the Count of Monte Cristos in 1984s. But it has a lot of the, not Lord of the Rings elements per se, but Game of Thrones and things like that in it. But for me, it'd be really fun to do something where the battle maps or the maps are not like rotating all around each other in space. And I don't have to constantly have a reason. I can't just nuke something from orbit. I mean, here's the problem with anything you have in the Red Rising world. The real answer is nuke it from orbit. Arrows on Mars, nuke the planet. So it'd be really nice to just have people on like a journey being like, I slept underneath this tree and it was wet. Instead of like, actually this time Mercury is closer to Mars than it is to Earth, and it's actually more often close to Mars than to Earth. And because of the gravitational rotation, we can approach that and not be seen by the enemy sensor fleets. And I'm like, or like, maybe it was a foggy day and it's so if you're really just do fantasy, and even in fantasy, I'm like, okay, there's a wizard now. Now it is a foggy day. Really nice.
Well, thank you, Susan Sue, for writing this series. This stuff just kicks ass.
Thank you.
I'm gonna end up being a good question. I don't know if it was a marketing shtick or not, but you said that Lightbringer was your favorite of the ones that you had written. I'm with him, like I fucking loved it. And a couple people have touched on how much of the picture you kind of have going into what you're doing, and I'm not sure if I don't know if any of the other books you came up with the title for the next one as early as you came up with Word God. I'm assuming as we're getting closer and closer to the end picture has sort of taken shape for you. I remember in the previous book signing, you had said that you had put a bunch of characters' names on hats. Who am I going to kill? And it was right?
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you said that you even put Severus in the name.
It's very true. But hey, in all fairness, only my friend Joel and my friend Aaron and my mom read my book at that time, and then I found my mom didn't even read it. And as I said, who's your favorite character? She's like, the main one, baby. That's his name. So when I put people in the hat, in all fairness, I thought it was just for 2 people who read it.
So where I'm going with this is, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm reading Lightbringer, and there were moments where I'm feeling all of this anxiety. Like shit, like I'm not gonna be okay if certain people I have to say bye to, right? So I'm wondering, as here you are with,
I'll protect them, I swear.
Are you asking whose characters or like for me?
Yeah.
The ones for me.
Yeah, you were dating.
Okay,
She wasn't good.
Severo.
Hold on, I'll take minutes. Yeah, okay, so I've cut you off a few times. Your point?
So my point is, are you, like, is anybody optimist for you at this point? Like, do you know, right, like, how much of that friend do you have, and has, over the course of the books, has anybody become optimist for you?
No one was off limits for me. But I will say that I have. Where is the thing? I would say no one is off limits. I do have a plan, but that plan is subject to change because I like seeing it can feel unnatural. I've already killed off in my plan, I've killed off one of the people you named in a previous book, but it didn't feel right when I wrote it. So it didn't end up happening. And so in the same way that the plan that does exist, I'm trying to be very vague. The plan that does exist is also subject to change. And so, you know, the hat, I had the hat, yes, this is true, I was writing, the hat was called, it was labeled Deus Ex Machina, which is out of God machine, right? It's like an old Greek stage plays, stories would often end with miraculous events, with a god being lowered down to help everything out or ruin everything by a crane, so it's God out of machine. And so I had this hat, and I put every name in there except for at the time, theirs and Virginia's. And then I drew out, unfortunately, Pax's name, right? And then the hat did not, was not revisited until, well, a certain mute obsidian ran afoul of the hat. But then I lost the hat. And I told people this long tour that I lost the hat. So I haven't used the hat since. The hat was used in the library. And I'm really bummed that I lost the hat. But 3 tour stops ago, some guy came up and said, I heard you lost the hat. And then so the hat is back. But I won't ever do it to just try to get a reaction from you. It has to be part of the story. It has to be natural. And I think that while I tease about abusing your emotions, that's not the goal. The goal is to tell a great story. A story that makes sense, but is surprising, but inevitable.
Well, yeah, that was kind of like my follow-up on, it's like, I wonder how much you keep your story in mind while also knowing that you have this massive following.
Yeah, I am aware that there may be physical dangers to my safety in certain characters. I have, yeah, I should probably hire a guy for these things. Thank you. Yeah. I do. Was that a threat? It's good you know. She walks away, it's good you know. His head is not safe.
Real quick, off the bat, was it Virginia or South?
You really want to use your question?
So I was really intrigued with, this is like a spoiler.
Ask me the second one.
Okay, so maybe I'll just use my question.
Yes.
So to start, I would like to say that thank you for what you're doing with the Abomination storyline. I never thought I would feel so much anxiety over a 12-year-old that needs to touch grass. I do have, I've always thought of questions I would like to ask you. One very spoiler heavy, one definitely not so for a church. One about soup. But the main one I would go for is.
This is really fascinating.
Yeah. What is your mindset when writing stuff for Apollonius?
It's pure belief. Apollonius is where I get to use all the words that everyone would say I'm pretentious for using if I just know them. Apollonius is saying them, so it's not me that's being pretentious, it's Apollonius. He's just so fun because he's cast, I haven't gotten to explore much, many parallels between I haven't gotten to really explore Paradise Lost in my series. It's not necessarily germane. However, I love the concept that Apollonius is like the entire concept of it is inspired by Lucifer as being this glorious, tragic hero. And so for me, it's really channeling the grandiose absurdity of Paradise Lost and a man who thinks that's a model to live by into the series. And so it's simply like, I think it's really fascinating finding who characters think are heroes, who's their hero. And for me, like Lucifer being Apollonius' hero, just sends him writing himself. And so the dialogue and all that stuff, none of it's research, it just seems to like flow. It's like I imagine if Bane was horny and had 3 glasses of scotch. Hope that works.
Thank you so much.
One more question. Do we have a knife that can decide? Alright, if you guys really think it's a great question, who thinks that's a good one? Rock, paper, scissors. Thanks guys, appreciate it.
So Patrick Rothfuss managed his series after I finished his Name of the Wind.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Patrick Rothfuss, I finished his first Name of the Wind, 2 Name of the Wind books, and I saw he left a review online saying Red Rising was really great. So it's been 10 years, and he hasn't released his 3rd book. And I was wondering, you only had 4 years, and that's pretty good. So what is your writing process, what's your routine, and how do you actually be productive?
First of all, I love that, and like I really, I feel for him. It is a bear on your back because no one wants it to be done more than Pat. No one wanted my book out in 2 years more than me. The problem is when you think you've created something that's really cool and special, and also it had connection with so many people over it, you don't want to let them down. And you don't want to let the story down. And so it's like you're being held ransom by knowing all writers know we're not as good as everyone thinks we are. And the difficulty then is representing a story that is as good as everyone thinks your story is. And when the more successful it gets, the harder it is. So for me, I try to really not pay attention to any of that and really get back into the story. So I started listening to Tim Gerard Reynolds do the original trilogy, and that helped me find my footing in the world again. In terms of having, my process is chaos, and I don't say that to romanticize it. I wish I was very strict. And when I do sit in front of the computer, I become very strict. And I try to keep it like a job. I try to work out in the morning, walk my dog, so I can at least get 2 things successful done in that day, right? And also my dog has like the cutest eyes, and like, if I haven't walked her, she stares at me, I'm just like, I don't have father. And then she fits in my bed. I wish she wasn't as passive aggressive, but, can't remember everything. And so for me, it really is about trying to maintain at least a solid 4-hour chunk. I try to do it after I've done those 2 things, and I turn off my phone, I turn off my internet, I don't look at my emails yet, and I try to do a 4-hour chunk, and just Stephen King's book on writing really helped me do that. And you can get everything you need to get done in the day's writing in a 3-hour period, maybe a 4-hour period. But the real danger is when you think I'll get more done by doing a 12-hour period, where instead you just stretch yourself out like taffy. But I think I write best when I'm like an arrowhead. And that's by whittling the time down to a short period, being very aggressive with it, and having an achievable goal. But the biggest thing that especially, are you writing?
I mean, I've written very little, but I hope one day.
But you've written, and you want to write, so you're right. Okay. Now I've got that out of the way. The hardest thing with writing is if you have great taste, your taste will always outstrip your talent. That's why you should not reread your own stuff, because it'll be dumb shit. It will be, and it should be, because you need to get it out first. And so I liken the concept of people try to write and be editors at the same time. You're not an editor. You're not trying to be an editor. You're trying to be a writer. So, but how can you edit your thing when you haven't finished the project? You can edit it when you realize what the whole project looks like. And so I think that the best advice I can give, the best thing that I need to constantly remind myself about is I need to write, finish the project, and not reread and find fault with myself, grow insecure, and then try to fix it, because I'm in front of it, and I'm faking it, and I'm trying to be smart. Whereas instead, I should be trying to finish the draft so that I have, I don't know, use another metaphor. I have the frame of the car, before I'm trying to figure out what pressure the tires should have. And I think we get distracted by the minutia because we fear the greater thing. We fear the big thing. But the thing is, you're just acting like it doesn't matter if you write a shitty sentence sometimes. Honestly, I've read Twilight, it doesn't matter. The point is, you string together a story that is compelling. And then the other stuff takes care of itself, or you'll get better this way. So I would say, when I'm at my best, I'm not editing. I'm writing, I'm being deepful in a 4-hour window and going and living my life and growing experiences and creating energy for myself that I use in writing. Then I'm at my worst, so I'm trying to perpetuate a 7-day work schedule where I'm working 12 hours a day, then I get run down, get insomnia, and have a sad time. That's how characters die. So be sharp, be explicit with what you're doing when you're doing it, and just don't be distracted, and then realize after 4 months of doing that, you have a book, and then you can make it good. So thank you. All right. Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming out. It means the world to me that you guys love this series. I have said the metaphor of the fort a lot. When I was a kid, I was moving around a lot of places, sometimes in the city, sometimes in the country when I was lucky. My favorite thing in the world to do was to build a fort and have friends come and play in that fort. I would usually force them to. My parents made a big mistake when they gave me an airsoft gun. But when they would pretend to play, Siege of Minas Tirith, if I was deep with me, it became more real. The more people that participated in it, the more real it felt. And it suspended the anxiety of the real world, but also helped me create a lot of valuable friendships. And so for me, this is the fort, building these books. The more of you guys that tell me your thoughts on it, you come out like this and how I made this, the happier I get. So thank you so much.